In 2008, I started teaching leadership. Otherwise, my basic subject is negotiation. That's what I'm supposed to be some kind of expert in, since I have a PhD in that subject. But I'm not going to talk about negotiation today, though I have used the entire Mahabharata to build a framework of negotiating ability. But in 2008, when I started teaching leadership, the dominant definition from the social sciences was that leadership is a process by which a person influences others to accomplish an objective and directs the organization in such a way that makes it more cohesive and coherent. And I thought this was a very wholesome definition of leadership till something happened. Several seas away, there was the US subprime crisis. And back home, we had one scam which actually shook the foundations of the world of business in India. And that was Ramalingam Raju, and that was Satyam. Now, here was the irony that here was a company called Satyam, and here was a person called Ramalingam. And then he scammed India in such a way that we lost 0.4% of the GDP in that particular year itself. And therefore, the question I asked myself, is there the lack of a spiritual compass when we talk about leadership? Because if you look at the definition of leadership, which was prevalent in the social sciences, it did not have any allusion to any kind of a moral compass, ethical compass, or a spiritual compass. And therefore, I started my journey on trying to define spiritual leadership through our ancient scriptures. Now, that is a model that I'm going to talk about today. You know, when it comes to spirituality, adhyatma, अर्थात आत्मा द्वारा अधिकृत, जो भी आत्मा द्वारा अधिकृत हो वह अध्यात्म है. लेकिन संशय इस बात का है कि आत्मा का क्या अर्थ हुआ, क्योंकि कुछ लोगों के लिए आत्मा का अर्थ है सोल, कुछ के लिए आत्मा का अर्थ है सोल, कुछ के लिए आत्मा का अर्थ है सेल्फ, कुछ के लिए आत्मा का अर्थ है भगवान, ईश्वर. लेकिन the definition that I picked up, the meaning that I picked up was conscience. And therefore what I said is that everything that is allowed by a conscience is something which is the right thing to do. On basis that, I define spirituality as understanding your own self, the universe around you, your relationship with the universe, and thereby also understanding your responsibility towards that universe. Because please remember, one of the things that the ancient scriptures have taught us is that to understand your responsibility, you have to first understand your relationship. The moment I get to know that these are my parents, I know what my responsibility are. The moment I get to know that he or she is my child, he or she is my brother or sister, I immediately know as to what my responsibilities are. And therefore, even if you look at the environmental issues today, the moment you understand your relationship with the environment, Om Dyau Shanti, Prithvi Shanti, Rapa Shanti, Roshadaya Shanti, you understand the relationship, you will immediately understand what is your responsibility towards each of these. And therefore, basis that, when I looked at spiritual leadership, I will talk about the model, so you can fill up the FIRE model, F-I-R-E, the FIRE model of spiritual leadership. So if one wants to become a spiritual leader in the HR domain, and if we want to perpetuate that, the F of the FIRE stands for fortitude. And incidentally, the source of this FIRE model is Gita and the 40th chapter of Yajurveda. So I'm sure all of you are an extremely learned people in terms of the ancient scriptures, but very few people know that Gita is actually an explanation of the 40th chapter of Yajurveda, which has 17 mantras, which together are called the Ishopanishad. And therefore, this model has been derived from there, and it says that you need these three elements if you want to be a spiritual leader. The first is F. F stands for fortitude, nirbhayata. Nirbhayata, which means that you need to control your fear from people, things, and death. And what better solution? What better solution than to talk about Gita? Because if you recall, when Arjun came, he first asked Krishna to take his chariot between the two armies so that he could see as to who was he going to fight. But the moment he looked at Pitama, the moment he looked at Drona, the moment he looked at Krip, uska sharir kaapne laga. और उसने अपने धनुष बाण रख दिए और वो अपने रथ पे बैठ गया, बोला कृष्ण मैं नहीं लड़ पाऊंगा. And that is when Krishna said, क्षुद्रम हृदयम दौर्बल्यम त्यक्तम उत्तिष्ठ, क्षुद्र मन की दुर्बलता को त्यागो और उठो. And subsequently, to also allay his fear of death, he talked about the real nature of death. You can't understand life without understanding death. And therefore, the moment you say, Nainam chindanti shastrani, Nainam dahati pavaka, etc., you know what the real soul is. You know what the reality of the body is, and you know what the permanence of the soul is all about. So the first thing of the fire model is F, that is fortitude. The IR of the fire model stands for introspective reflections. Atma manthan, Atma chintan. A spiritual leader has to actually look inside. We continue to look outside, which is fine. We have to look outside as well. But you also have to look inside. And the first thing that you have to understand while looking inside is, who are you? You have to know yourself. For example, every time I'm introduced as Himanshu Rai, the director of IIM Indore. Please note, this is my most superficial identity, because it's drawn from a designation that I hold. And all the spiritual leaders have to understand that there is a real and present danger if you start associating your identity with your designation. And what is that danger? That more often than not, we tend to associate our self-worth with our identity, our self-respect with our identity. Now look at this connection. If I'm drawing my identity from my designation, and if I'm drawing my self-respect and self-worth from my identity, then the day the designation goes, so will my self-respect. So will my identity. I'm not going to be the director of IIM Indore forever. It's a 5-year tenure. I'm going to finish it. I might get another 5-year tenure. I have gotten another 5-year tenure, but even that would end at some point of time. And therefore, I have to draw my identity from something deeper. Once again, the Indian knowledge system, the Bharatiya Jnana Parampara, comes up with a solution. The Pandavas and the Kauravas have finished their education in the ashram of Drona and Krip, and now they are going back to the Raj Mahal. But before going to the Raj Mahal, they are taken to a place called Rangbhumi. And in Rangbhumi, they are expected to showcase their skills. And before entering the Rangbhumi, they are expected to introduce themselves. Now they go by the order of seniority. So Yudhishthir goes first and says, "Main Bhishma ka patra, Gandhari aur Dhritarashtra ka bhatija, Pandu aur Kunti ka putra, da da da, blah blah blah." Yudhishthir. Bhim goes in and again gives a very long introduction. "Main ABC, DEF, GHI, Bhim." Arjun goes in and says, "Main Drona Shishya Arjun." And he enters. And Vidur asks him, "Parth, kya tumhara yahi parichay hai?" And Arjun says that the moment of time and life that I find myself in, this is my only relevant identity. Now that is the Atma Chintan. That is the Atma Manthan. Who are you truly? Who are you truly if you shorn yourself of your designation, if you shorn yourself of everything that you claim that you have in the material world? So if any of you ask me, who are you? And if I have to give my introduction, I'll say I'm a teacher, or I'll say I'm a mountaineer. Because those are the two things from where I draw my true passion from. Those are the two things which make me truly happy when I'm either climbing a peak, attempting a peak at least, if not climbing it, or when I'm in a classroom situation talking to people and exchanging ideas and thoughts. And therefore, for any leader, any spiritual leader, there has to be a pursuit of introspective reflection. And finally, the E of my fire model stands for equanimity. Sthir Prajyata. Sthir Prajyata. The entire Gita is about Sthir Prajyata. The entire concept of Nishkam Karma is about Sthir Prajyata. Which means, irrespective of whether you are in a state of abundance or whether you are in a state of depravity or deprived state, you must maintain the same emotions. We talk about emotional intelligence, but Sthir Prajyata goes way beyond emotional intelligence, because what it talks about is, and I think that is at the core of ending corruption as well. If at all you can differentiate between your desire and your needs, you will always realize that you have enough. Because if at all you fall prey to your desires, then the Yajurved says, "Yad jagrato durumudaiti daivam tadu suptasya tathaivaiti. Duram gamam jyot sham jyoti rekam tanme manah shiv sankalpamastu." That the human mind goes so much in the state of wakefulness as it does in the state of sleep. Jagrit avastha mein bhi utni dur chala jata hai jitna ki supta avastha mein. Controlling that human mind, because that indeed is at the root of all desires. So a spiritual leader has to be in pursuit of controlling the desires and differentiating between the need and the desire, because just like Gandhi said, this universe has got enough to satisfy every man's need, but this universe will never have enough to satisfy even one man's greed. And the second element of this equanimity is that you control envy. 6 मंत्र हैं अथर्ववेद में, और वो 6 के 6 जो 6 दिशाएं हैं उनको बोल रहे हैं कुछ ना कुछ. सो एक ही मंत्र का उल्लेख मैं करूंगा. ओम प्राची दिग अग्निरधिपति रसितो रक्षितादित्या ईश्वः तेभ्यो नमो ईशुभ्यो नमो एभ्यो अस्तु योस्मान द्वेष्टियम वयम दुष्मस्तम वोजम भेदद्मः. उसी तरह से ओम दक्षिणा, ओम प्रतीचि, ओम उदीचि, ओम ध्रुवा, ओम ऊर्ध्वा. 6 दिशाओं के बारे में बोला गया. बट द मेन सेंटेंस ओवर हियर इज योस्मान द्वेष्टियम वयम द्विष्मस्तम वोजम भेदद्मः. जो लोग मुझसे द्वेष करते हो, योस्मान द्वेष्टियम, दुष्मस्तम वोजम, जिनसे मैं द्वेष करता हूं, उस द्वेष की भावना को ही दद्मः, भस्म कर दो. क्योंकि यदि हमारे से किसी को द्वेष नहीं होगा और यदि मुझे किसी से द्वेष नहीं होगा, तो मेरा जो मस्तिष्क है वो स्थिर प्रज्ञ हो जाएगा. और ये चिंतन एक ही दिशा से नहीं हो रहा है, बल्कि 6 दिशाओं से हो रहा है. अर्थात हमारे जीवन में कोई भी हो, whether it's a subordinate, whether it's a peer group, whether it's a superior, whether it's a customer, whether it's a supplier. So we are talking about a 360-degree approach to actually killing envy, to actually killing this particular spirit that we have about comparing ourselves or about looking, did he or she get more than what I did? And therefore, I believe that if we adopt this FIRE model and work more on it, the fortitude, introspective reflections, and equanimity, we will be able to create leaders who will be responsible leaders and who will make decisions which are not only inclusive, but they are equitable, thereby creating a better world. Thank you very much.